Welcome to Paper Boys, the weekly podcast where we unravel the research papers behind the latest major headlines in science news. I'm your host, James.
And I'm your other host, Charlie. James, I'm excited for yet another episode number 46.
Episode 46, we're getting up there.
We're getting up there. Coming up on the 1 year anniversary, 52.
Oh, so many fond memories.
Yeah, we'll have to plan something special for that.
Yes, but before then, we have an episode to do.
Yes, so James, you have a paper for us today. What's it all about?
This paper is about brown fat and what effects caffeine has on our body.
Okay, you guys can't see me right now, but I just made like the grossest grimace.
I can attest, Charlie's making a pretty gross grimace.
The word brown fat just sounds so disgusting.
Yeah, it sounds
Actually,
pretty gross.
Let's call this whole episode off, James. Find a new paper. We'll record tomorrow.
All right, so Charlie, this episode, truthfully, my hidden agenda is this is my episode to counter your eggs episode.
Ooh, bring us back into popularity. People are like mad about the egg episode.
Yeah, I think people will be happy about this episode.
All right, we'll leave it at that. So James and I are both PhD students, and we read a lot of papers in our own research. And so we've sort of developed a knack for getting it done quickly and doing it effectively and communicating the science that's there. So we started this podcast as a way to share this love for science and demystify science that's in the news by actually uncovering those papers, direct from the source, if you will.
In short, we are the Paper Boys. Before we get started on this episode about caffeine and brown fat, we just wanted to first off say thank you for again listening to our podcast. If you aren't already, please do follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is @PaperboysPod. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's comments, thoughts, questions, concerns, new papers, feelings of the day. Feel free to reach out.
Also, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/paperboyspod. We just released our first bonus episode, which was about the experiment that confirmed Einstein's theory of relativity. It was honestly like the most fun that I've had recording an episode of Paper Boys.
It was great.
Yeah.
Also a really cool experiment that just celebrated its centenary. Its 100th birthday just last month.
Yeah, so it was cool. We dug into some news articles from the year 1919, which was fun. And yeah, it was just overall like a really fun episode to do. Cool spin on this show if you happen to enjoy the format. So check that out, patreon.com/paperboyspod. We've
also just updated the website as well. New release. Check it out, paperboyspodcast.com.
Yeah, we slaved away at that one, and we think it looks nice. But we're looking for beta testers. Tell us what any mistakes there. So
yes.
James, let's get down to brass tacks here. Let's get down to brown fat here. What is brown fat?
As they say. All right. So brown fat is a fat that people and animals have. When you're born as a child, you are born made up about 5% of brown fat. Okay. Brown fat is different, though, than white fat, the other predominant fat in your body.
Okay. Does this actually have to do with like light and dark meat, or is this totally unrelated?
No, it's similar.
Really?
It's similar, I think, because dark meat has more like vascular structure, right?
I don't know. It just always freaks me out to think like, let's say you were a family of bears and you were cooking up a human to eat. Would there be like white and dark meat?
Interesting. I don't know. Humans are red meat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
So it's not like, I don't think dark meat is dark meat because of brown fat. Brown fat serves a different purpose. White fat is the storage of energy. So if you eat excess calories, your body like isn't just going to waste it. It converts it into white fat.
Okay.
Brown fat, however, though,
that was my nickname in high school.
Brown fat?
No, white fat.
White fat? Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Says Charlie, never mind. So brown fat serves a very important purpose of thermoregulation in the human body. It consumes energy and creates heat. So like for a baby, this is actually really interesting. Do you know babies don't shiver?
What?
They haven't developed their shiver response yet.
That's so weird. Wait, why do we shiver anyway? Just like
to stay warm.
generates warmth?
Yeah.
Huh.
So it consumes energy and turns it into, it's like a form of thermogeneration.
Okay. So babies don't shiver, but they have brown fat?
So they use brown fat to generate heat because they're very incapable of controlling their own temperature otherwise. You know, they have a hard time putting on hats and getting out of a cold, drafty area.
Turning on the heater and
yeah. I mean,
paying the
babies-
electricity bill. Babies don't really do that. That's
No.
crazy. All right. So now that I guess my curiosity is satisfied about what brown fat is, what is this paper? Like how did you come across this? Was there news on this?
Wait, Charlie, you're missing one of the key questions here.
Okay. Which is,
Why is brown fat brown?
oh, I guess I just don't think about those things, James.
Basics, man. It's the basics. Unlike white fat, that was a very planted question. Unlike white fat, which is storing calories, brown fat is packed with mitochondria, which are the energy cells,
The powerhouse of the cell.
powerhouse of the cell. Exactly. And so they burn energy to produce heat.
Okay.
And brown fat gets its color from having high levels of these iron-containing mitochondria.
Okay. So brown fat, full of mitochondria, lots of powerhouse.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's
It's gonna
important for the
generate
paper. That's
Okay,
important for
gotcha.
the paper.
So now that my curiosity is truly satisfied, and I know why brown fat is brown, which was clearly burning right in the front of my mind.
Yes.
Where did this paper come from? What's the story here? Why was this in the news?
So this paper came, it was actually on a lot of different news outlets because it's about caffeine and burning fat, which
Yeah.
is like if you want to sell something that involves caffeine and burning fat.
Yeah, like the things that every person likes to talk about at the water cooler. Like, oh,
Yeah.
don't talk to me till I've had my coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly in that voice
How's
too.
your diet going?
Some of the headlines that I saw were like CBS News said coffee could help you burn fat. New study finds. Not super interesting or original.
Okay.
No offense, CBS News. New York Post came out and said coffee and, quote, brown fat could be the secrets to fighting obesity. I'll give you my feelings on that headline later. But
Okay.
CNN said, could coffee help you lose weight? New research suggests a fat busting effect.
Ooh, fat busting coffee.
You're getting the trend.
Yeah.
Then WebMD had an article, could coffee be a help in weight loss? You got it.
Okay. Yeah, so it's pretty self-explanatory. You're right. That like you put coffee and fat in the same sentence, or you have a study that has those two things in it, guaranteed coverage.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I can... Anyway, yeah.
It makes you feel better about drinking coffee.
Who doesn't love drinking coffee?
Yeah.
So I saw those, and honestly, usually for paper boys, when I see something like that, I'm like, man, this is going to be another one of those like coffee studies that sort of like the egg thing where you're like, it's back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, yeah.
This one was a little different. This one was very like, it was a very biological, it was a very biocentric paper.
Oh, really?
So it was interesting to look at.
Not like, I guess the point of comparison, since you brought it up, was the egg study, where they are looking at like it's like a statistical analysis of health data,
Yes.
which it seems like a lot of nutrition studies are.
This one this was very much like a cell bio paper.
Oh, okay.
And they did some cool experiments. So after skimming through it, I was like,
Ooh.
yeah. They did some in vitro and in vivo experiments. So it was kind of
Wow.
cool to see.
Okay. Where was this actually published?
So this is coming out of the University of Nottingham, primarily. First author is Ksenia Velikovic. And then there's like 10 different authors, mostly from Nottingham, with a little bit of collaboration from UCLA / the Los Angeles Healthcare Systems, Veterans Association, Endocrinology, and Diabetes Divisions. Whew, that was a mouthful.
Okay.
And this was published in Scientific Reports at the end of June this year.
Okay. Scientific Reports. That's like the least descriptive name for a journal, but.
Well, I think it's part of Science.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's very legit.
I'm wrong. It is part of Nature.
Oh.
Nature
Well.
Scientific Reports.
I had a lot of respect for this paper, but now.
Yeah, just Nature. Whatever.
Okay. So published in Nature, Scientific Reports.
Yes.
And you said that it has an experimental component to it?
Yeah, which
So like, sorry, before I even dive into that, like what were they setting out to prove here? Like what was their hypothesis? Why did they even start studying this? Like coffee and brown fat? What?
so brown fat's interesting because it has some interesting properties. Brown fat is very beneficial and it shows up in interesting places in nature. So if you look at small mammals as an example, some of the longest living small mammals have very high percentages of brown fat in their body.
Really? Like what animals?
Like certain species of bat and then certain species of ground mole. I think if I read it correctly, they have like 30% brown fat body composition.
And how long do they live?
Or sorry, not 30% composition. They live on the order of 30 years.
Oh, 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, in the wild, that's a long time.
Yeah. And brown fat's important for a small mammal too. That's a really long time.
Yeah. Wait, so why is there like a correlation between how much brown fat you have and like health or like how long you live?
It's a good question. So the thing is that brown fat burns fat as fuel.
Oh, okay. It's like a cannibal fat.
Yeah, basically.
It's just out to get all the white fat.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. I got down a rabbit hole of brown fat. There's actually two different types of brown fat. One type of brown fat is like white fat that's like converted into brown fat. But then there's like this pure brown fat that has embryonic origins similar to muscle tissue.
Okay. So like it was
sort of
maybe like
serves a
destined
different-
to be muscle, but then it just became fat.
I guess so. If you trace it on its like as your embryo's developing, like
Yeah.
at some point in time, like the decision is made, like you will be brown fat or you will be muscle tissue.
That's so weird that there would be two ways of producing brown fat.
Yeah, and I don't know enough to say why one goes one way or the other.
Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like brown fat is kind of like intrinsic to the body, whereas white fat is something that is produced just when you eat too much.
Well, they're both intrinsic, but they serve different purposes.
Yeah.
Different sort of origins.
Okay.
But so what's cool with brown fat is, so it burns fat for fuel, usually to generate heat.
Right.
But because of this, it helps with things like atherosclerosis. I don't know if I said that right, but that's where you get fat buildup in your arteries, like plaque.
Oh, okay.
So it could help reduce that. Also is helpful for reducing cholesterol levels, improving glucose balance for things like diabetes,
Okay.
and for improving
Checking all the boxes here.
even bone density and reducing bone loss.
Okay. So what you're saying is that brown fat is a superfood.
Panacea, yeah.
What is panacea?
It's like a cure-all.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Brown fat is, put it on the next BuzzFeed listicle of.
All you need is some avocados, brown fat, and a little bit of artificial intelligence, and nothing can stop you.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially once you start leveraging big data. I mean,
Yeah, take your brown fat up to the cloud.
yeah. Is brown fat IoT enabled?
Not yet.
Okay.
Almost.
Okay. All right. I'm on board. I'm on board the brown fat train.
Yes, that sounds kind of gross, but I agree.
It's not something you want to ride. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So brown fat has these health benefits. And one of the things they noticed is that it declines as you get older.
Oh, interesting.
And so people are curious about ways to help stimulate the growth of brown fat. And so things that have been found to work, like cold therapy. So slowly introducing yourself to colder temperatures is actually good.
Like just for minutes a day, or like living somewhere colder?
I think living somewhere colder is definitely correlated with having higher levels of brown fat. And I do think different types of cold therapy are supposed to be effective. Like people will talk about training in ice baths and stuff, which is good for
Oh, yeah.
like muscle recovery. But I think it's also good for helping stimulate brown fat.
I wonder if that has anything to do with, like, you know how people will say, like, you take cold showers and it's good for you? Like, I don't know if there's science on that. There might be, but
I mean, I think it's based on that idea.
on like the brown fat idea.
I think brown fat is a core part of that.
Really?
From
That's
what I was
really
reading,
cool.
at least.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
And one of the things is that researchers know that food plays a role in brown fat activity, but until this study really, like, they haven't really identified specific nutrients that play a role in brown fat activity and stimulation.
Okay. So then the goal of this study was to try and like isolate something?
Yeah, and so they looked at caffeine.
Okay. What led them to look at caffeine? Like, is there previous work on this?
So there's been some previous like animal studies that show that these types of brown fat, so both types, could be activated through different nutrients like capsaicin analogs, like that you find in peppers.
Yeah, like spicy food.
And previously, caffeine's been associated with like weight loss and increased energy expenditure as well. Also, reduced risk of type 2 diabetes from drinking coffee
Yeah.
or getting caffeine.
Okay.
And there's this, sorry, this is like a long-winded explanation, but this is sort of what they walked through in the paper.
We're on a podcast, James. We can take as much time as we want.
It's true. Thank you for continuing to listen. So they've noticed that there's this protein, it's called uncoupling protein 1 or UCP1, that has been upregulated in certain animals when they take caffeine.
What does UCP1 do?
So UCP1 is located inside mitochondria that are in this brown fat. And
okay.
like they've seen signs that caffeine might be stimulating the brown fat, but there hasn't been a study yet that says like that directly tests is caffeine stimulating brown fat. And we'll talk about what stimulating actually means in this context.
Okay. It's kind of coming together though. I mean, so I just want to make sure I understand before we dive into like the specifics on this paper.
Yeah.
So brown fat has a host of good effects on animals.
Yep.
Like they could be good for your health. It's made up of a lot of mitochondria.
Yep.
And caffeine is shown to induce production of this UCP1, which is a protein found in mitochondria.
Yes. As well as like giving people more energy and sort of showing these effects that brown fat does as well. So there's sort of this correlation between caffeine and what brown fat does.
I see.
So trying to look to see maybe like, is there a little bit more causation here than just correlation, in my own words?
Okay. That helps me. So there's like a natural reason to draw a connection between these two.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to like understand why that was.
Yeah.
That it wasn't just for the reason of like we said at the beginning, like, well, people seem to like coffee. Why don't we write a paper about caffeine?
This is going to go viral.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So there's been a lot of lead up science to it as well. And sort of a side motivator for this as well is brown fat's actually hard to measure in the body. You end up having to do two different scans. You have to do a CT scan to find fat deposits. And then you have to do a PET scan, PET scan, to look for areas of high metabolic output.
Okay, because the brown fat, because its role is sort of like consuming energy and producing heat. But that's why you need to correlate the metabolic energy with it.
But you don't want to confuse it with white fat.
Right.
And brown fat shows up in sort of strange areas. You can almost...
Yeah, that was my next question is like, I mean, when you get fat, like it usually kind of collects in the same pretty common culprits, like the stomach, like the hips.
Yeah.
You know.
For white fat, that's definitely true. For brown fat, it's actually like, it's difficult to measure. So usually upper chest and neck, people have brown fat. And then they also find it sort of down like the spinal column a little bit.
Huh, interesting.
Around vertebrae and then some other places. And so these researchers they've done some past work to use thermal imaging. So like FLIR.
Oh yeah, or FLIR, whatever it's called.
FLIR, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a thermal camera. It's like, think of like in, what's the movie? Is it Predator?
Yeah.
Where he has the thermal vision.
Tracking people.
Yeah. Like an actual, like we have a thermal camera in the lab and like you can look around at stuff and it shows stuff is red if it's hot and it's blue if it's cold.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Dude, why do you do anything else other than play with that?
Yeah, it's pretty fun to mess around with.
So they have a thermal imaging way to look for brown fat that they've tested previously. And so this is sort of a way to do in vivo tests with humans then.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you would have to be imaging fat that's like near the surface then, right? If you're just aiming a camera at a person's like skin, you're not like opening them up, right?
No, they're not opening them up.
Okay.
So it seems to show that it's not just like skin temperature, like the resolution. I'll show you the pictures that they have.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. So you actually do notice a difference in the skin temp in these areas where there's brown fat, and they do a test to show whether it's like actually from the caffeine or not.
Okay. So it sounds like they've identified where the brown fat is in these people, these participants,
Yeah.
and they can actually measure the heat. You said there was also an in vitro part of this. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
What was that?
So just taking a step back real quick, they did it sort of they presented at least the results in 2 steps.
Okay.
So it started with in vitro, where they basically grew these fat cells from stem cells from mice.
Oh, really?
And then
Just like in a petri dish that just had like a collection of fat?
basically, from the way I understand it.
Okay.
I'm not a biologist.
Okay.
And so they exposed these stem cell generated brown fat cells to caffeine, 1 micromole, and found increased amounts of this UCP1 protein. They also saw different signs of increased cell metabolism.
Really? Wait, sorry. First, how do they introduce caffeine to these cells? Just like squirted it?
I think so.
Okay.
I think they live in some sort of solution and they injected it. I was wondering that.
Okay.
I didn't quite glean that.
I mean, that's fine. I guess I'm just wondering, does that mean that like when we drink caffeine, is it actually just like distributing around our body that way? Like, is that how chemicals work in the body?
I think it's getting pumped through the bloodstream. And then so it spreads through your vasculature.
Yeah. I guess I'm like so far removed from biology and all that stuff that I just like, there's all this crazy stuff happening right inside my body that I just don't even think about.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, outer space or whatever. There's way cooler stuff going on right here.
You can go out for infinity and go in for infinity.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's crazy. It's a crazy life we live in these bodies.
Anyway, so they squirt caffeine on it, give it a nice little douse of coffee.
Yep.
And then you said that they can measure like the metabolic activity of the cells. Do you know how they do that?
Yes. So.
Okay, good. I just want to know that you knew.
Yep. And thank you for listening.
Okay.
So they introduce caffeine to these cells. And then the paper actually, it was interesting to read the specific steps for me as like a non-biologist, just to see like how many techniques these folks are trained in. It's crazy.
Yeah, we talked about this in an old episode, how like, you as an electrical engineer, you take classes where you kind of learn tool sets of like, I know how to use an oscilloscope now. I know how to
solder.
I know how to work with an op amp. Like in biology, are you taking a class where it's like, okay, this is how you measure cell metabolic activity?
I don't even know, but
like,
I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know. Any biologists listening, please reach out to us.
What is your life like?
Tell us what your life is like.
Yeah.
We'll have you on a grad student highlight. You can tell us all about your toolbox.
Reach out. Let us know.
And brown fat.
And brown fat. Yep. Tell us your thoughts about brown fat. So what they did was they did these tests. So they introduced caffeine for I think like 21 days. And then they did staining of the cultures. And you can look at fluorescence measurements then to track this UCP1 proliferation.
Okay.
So they can look at what was the baseline amount of UCP1 and then what was the UCP1, how much UCP1 was there after the introduction of caffeine. But they did more.
Okay, wait. We're going to get hung up probably on every little piece of this if I keep asking these questions. And I know we've already established that we're not biologists. But when you say staining and fluorescence, can you just give me like a 1 sentence what that means?
Staining means that they introduce a dye that attaches to like the mitochondria, parts of the mitochondria.
Okay.
So they can look at how the mitochondria is actually binding to different fats or lipids.
Okay.
And so they can look at like, one of the things they looked at was how is the shape of the mitochondria changing? How are the lipids, how many lipids are binding? And then there are certain dyes that they can attach to this protein like UCP1. So then you shine a light onto it and look at how much is reflected off. I think
that's
for the fluorescence
part.
And you can measure the intensity of the light that is fluoresced. Hopefully that's the right word.
Whatever. It's a word now.
You can measure that and compare the amounts of reflected light. It's not reflected light because it's
like excited.
Excited.
Yeah.
Corresponds to the amount of whatever it's that dye bounded to.
Okay, and you can kind of track like where those proteins are going and stuff.
Yeah. So if it's like brighter fluorescence, more protein.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can show you the pictures too.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the explanation.
Of course. That was more than a sentence, but
that's true. So they did this one technique for measuring metabolic activity.
there was one other part that they used for metabolic activity.
Okay.
They used fluorescence to measure UCP1. And then they also use this, they called it the seahorse assay, because I guess the company's called Seahorse. I was disappointed that it's not like, there's nothing related with seahorses. But they can use this to measure oxygen consumption, the oxygen consumption rate. And this is an indicator of mitochondrial respiration, which is correlated to production of energy.
Gotcha.
And extracellular acidification rate, which is an indicator of glycolysis, which is, again, one of those steps in turning like fat into energy.
Okay. So, yeah. So like you said, they have a lot of different ways of looking at this energy consumption.
Yep.
All right. And they found that energy consumption went up with caffeine?
So, yeah, they had some interesting findings. They found that caffeine promoted the expression of UCP1 and enhanced generation of mitochondria. So more mitochondria were produced after the introduction of caffeine.
Oh, whoa. Wait, I didn't realize that like there would just be new mitochondria created. I kind of thought that it was like, well, each cell gets a mitochondria and...
it's like, hey, Bill, you already got your mitochondria. Back off.
I thought it was like, make the workers work harder, not like hire more workers.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I was surprised by this too.
Okay.
But they have a picture and you're like, oh, there's more mitochondria there.
That's crazy.
And another cool thing is the shape of the mitochondria actually changed as well.
Wait, what? Wait, what is the mitochondria even shaped like?
Mitochondria is generally sort of like an oval. And then there's these squiggly lines inside called the lamellar cristae. And so they found that after the introduction of caffeine, the mitochondria had a rounder appearance with more abundant lamellar cristae.
Wow. Man, this is totally going to change my mornings.
Yeah.
I feel like now I'm just going to be now I'm just going to be thinking about like I'm feeding my mitochondria, they're so happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're drinking the coffee and they're like, getting a little morning stretch, rounding themselves out a little.
Round out. Yep. Flex those lamellar cristae a little bit. Move them around.
This is really cool.
Yeah. So basically they saw that caffeine was also increasing glycolysis, generation of energy from fat, and oxidative phosphorylation, which I think is another one of the steps in, I think, creating ATP.
And another word I never knew existed.
Association of Tennis Professionals. No. It's like the building block for energy. It's what I think muscles use.
Gotcha. I meant the phosphorylation part, but
my shallow understanding of biology is showing. Oh, phosphorylation.
Yeah, never heard that word.
I think it's one of those terms where they're like, this is an important part of biology in Bio 101. And you're like, okay. And you never take bio again.
Yeah. All right. Good. I'm glad that we, the engineers, have been are tackling this bio paper.
Yes. So long story short, what did they find from the in vitro test? They said more caffeine, more metabolically active cells.
Yeah.
One outstanding question I have from this part was they actually found that there was a decreasing coupling efficiency in the mitochondria. And I looked for a while to find out what this meant. And I couldn't. I found a cool article about studying mitochondria in Sherpas at high altitude.
Whoa.
And they said that Sherpas show a high level of coupling efficiency. So maybe it means that their mitochondria uses less to produce the same energy.
Yeah.
And in this case with caffeine, it's like you consume more, like you're burning the fat, which is good.
I see. Yeah, like it takes more work by the mitochondria to burn that extra energy.
Yeah.
Like it's not as efficient. They're not as efficient, basically.
Yeah, perhaps that, which is good if you're trying to like just burn fat.
Yeah,
it's bad
that's
if
a
you're
good
trying
point.
to haul someone's 200-pound backpack up a mountain that's 30,000 feet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's important for this study because they're specifically looking at burning fat.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads into the in vivo experiment.
Yes.
Did they like confirm what they found with these cell cultures?
Yeah, basically. So what they did for the in vivo experiment was they had people drink coffee and water in separate measurements. And then they used this infrared measuring technique, looking at the supralavicular region, which is so like basically high chest to neck.
Okay.
Which is the main region of brown fat in most adults. And they found that it got hotter.
Interesting. How much hotter did it get? Also, like I I know we should have talked about this at the beginning, but I just find myself wondering, like, why is that a high region of brown fat? Is it because like your lungs and your heart are there and they need some extra warmth or something? Like what controls
That's a really
that?
good question. I don't like evolutionarily. I don't know why. Maybe it's because like maybe you radiate a lot of heat out of your head for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like a way to sort of like quickly pass heat to your head and neck, which are
yeah, it's like
exposed.
close by.
But I don't know. Like why not on your arms
Yeah.
or like your belly or
Yeah, or anywhere. Anyway, sorry.
Anywhere.
That's a pointless side note, but so I'm curious how much it warmed up by when you said that they measured a difference.
Yeah, so it ends up being, it increases the average temperature by like about a half degree
Celsius?
Celsius.
Wow. That's pretty noticeable. I mean, like when you have a fever, you're only off by like a half degree Celsius.
Yeah.
And you feel horrible.
Yeah. Like here I have the picture, which we'll post a link to the paper. But Charlie, you can see clearly there's an increase in
Oh yeah.
temperature.
It's kind
in
of
this
like,
area.
I was thinking when you were talking about like upper chest, I was thinking kind of like in your pecs.
Mm-hmm.
But at this picture, you can tell it's really kind of where your shoulders meet your neck, but like
Almost
on
like
the front side.
Front side trapezius.
Yeah, like on the front of your traps. That's crazy. And they kind of show like a difference picture there.
So this is the reduced image of the hottest pixels
Gotcha.
overlaid with an image of the person.
Gotcha. And so you can see,
It becomes like more concentrated.
yeah, like so on the left, there's just kind of like a bunch of hotness kind of spread around. And on
So
the,
hot.
So hot. Yeah, what a hot chest. So, and then on the right, after they drank the coffee, yeah, you're right. It's like concentrated into these areas right on the front of the trap. It's really cool. Did they literally just like drink coffee? Like there must have been some more controlled way to introduce caffeine here.
I mean, so they did actually just drink coffee, but it was sort of funny reading it. But it was very controlled in the lead up to it.
Okay.
So they had 9 participants, 4 male, 5 female, which I was surprised. Like that seems really few, but
Yeah.
from their statistical analysis, they found that was enough to show statistical significance with like 95% confidence.
Yeah. And when you're doing like experimental stuff, it's hard to get a lot of people.
Yeah. 9 people, aged 27, 6-year standard deviation, normal BMI, and they were imaged using this technique that was developed at the university. They started in the morning, so like they couldn't like exercise a ton before.
Okay.
No caffeine use, drug use, alcohol consumption within 9 hours before, and they weren't allowed to eat 2 hours prior.
Okay.
So the room was temp controlled, and they were able to hang out in the room for like 30 minutes before the trial started just to get acclimated.
Okay.
So there wasn't
like
any
come to
weird,
equilibrium, like.
Yeah, it's like a nice, cool room.
Okay. Was the coffee hot and the water, or did they? I'm assuming they controlled the temperatures of those. And
It's funny you say that. After the baseline acclimatization,
I think you got it right.
it's hard to say. Participants consumed either a caffeinated beverage, which was Nescafe, with 65 milligrams of caffeine in 200 milliliters of water at 22 degrees Celsius,
Okay.
or water,
That's how I take my coffee, funny enough.
or water alone.
At 22 degrees Celsius, 200 milliliters.
I think so.
Okay.
And then they sat for 30 minutes to allow for caffeine absorption, and then they underwent the thermal imaging.
Okay. That sounds pretty straightforward.
And, oh, sorry, I'm just like looking back at my notes. The mean difference was 0.2 degrees Celsius.
0.2. Okay.
So still significant from like a body temp perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And it shows up. I mean,
Yeah.
like if it's there, it's there, you know?
You see the difference in the mean.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Was the thermal imaging the only thing that they did to show this? Like, do they have any other way of measuring metabolic activity?
So they would have had to do the CT scan to identify the regions, and then a PET scan where they drink the radioactive material, and
Yeah.
then they identify the areas of high metabolic activity. But they were sort of building off the previous research they had done that showed like this thermal imaging correlates very well with that other method and is way less time consuming.
And like costly, yeah. So the thermal imaging is just kind of like a cheap proxy for it.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that right there is a cool breakthrough,
Yeah.
if not already done, you know?
Yeah. I got the feeling from this paper there's like sort of an opportunity to show off their new method.
Well, that's cool. So it sounded like all these news articles were talking about like coffee losing weight, and I had the impression that this was more of like a nutritional study, but it really doesn't sound that way at all.
No, I mean, it's nutritional in the sense of like every paper or like scientific investigation in applied sciences, at least, is like motivated by something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the broader motivation, but it's like they didn't look at like, if you drink 2 cups of coffee a day for 30 days, will you lose 10 pounds?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
So I guess knowing something about brown fat and knowing what now caffeine does with brown fat, you can kind of draw some conclusions. I'm curious, what, in the author's words, what do they see as the significance of this?
It's a really good question. What they said in their own words was that these results provide new complementary evidence, both in vitro and in vivo. It's really important in bio, that caffeine can promote brown fat functions. And it's doing so at levels that are like compatible with human consumption. Like 65 milligrams of caffeine is like,
you don't need to
fine. Like,
you don't need to like snort a line of pure caffeine or something.
No, which I think is like some of the issues they run into with like some of those turmeric studies where they're looking at like, oh, if you eat lots of curry with turmeric, like it'll have it. But it's like those levels that they're testing at aren't quite compatible with human
I see.
absorption ability.
Okay. So it sounds like the implications of what they specifically put out there are fairly limited. They really have just drawn a pretty convincing link between caffeine and brown fat activity. Yeah,
which is a big step.
Of course, sorry. I didn't mean like limited as in there's nothing to get excited about here. I mean limited as in this is a very focused paper.
Yeah. And there are some like specific biological implications that they talk about because they were pretty thorough in looking at, especially for the in vitro tests, what the effects were of caffeine on like the mitochondrial generation, the oxygen consumption rates, the extracellular acidification rates. Like they came up with some specific biological metrics too. So when they're talking about the future work for the study, they're really interested to see like, how do these effects change with dose of caffeine? Is there like a minimum amount of caffeine that you need to introduce to see these effects? Like what's sort of that threshold? And I don't know, it's interesting, like what other foods might do this? Because like specific nutrients, I should say.
Yeah. Okay, so is there like any real merit then to what these news articles were saying about like more caffeine could actually help you lose weight? Or was that really kind of, well, we know A causes B, and we also know that B is related to C, therefore A causes C.
More of that like transitive sort of conclusion making.
Gotcha.
I mean, from what it looks like, stimulating brown fat in a healthy manner is good for your overall health.
Okay, yeah.
And caffeine seems to be doing that. And brown fat has to burn fat to create heat. So it's like, could caffeine stimulate weight loss? It's like, yeah, this could be a mechanism for it.
Yeah.
But again, it seems
that's
like
not really what the
science headlines took it a step too far. Like they sort of latched on this bigger idea that was the motivation behind the work, but like...
Yeah, but it was not really, that's not really what this paper concluded, so...
No, it seems there's so many other factors to weight loss that it's like...
Yeah. And it's also like a shame. I don't want to say it's a shame because it's, without these news articles, we wouldn't have heard about this paper. Mm-hmm. And this is really cool science. But it is just a little bit disappointing. Like we see with so many of these cases, they're glossing over what is really cool and breakthrough science to just pitch you like a potential maybe implication.
Yeah.
Like the only interest that these articles had in talking about this was to tell you, hey, like coffee could be part of your diet plan. And it's like, well, I mean, you've drawn that conclusion yourself and not really done right by these authors who did really cool research. They didn't, wasn't just analyzing nutrition,
Yeah. And it's like we talked about it on the replication episode where we were talking about Richard Feynman's talk a lot. Mm-hmm. And, like he mentions the physicist who's like looking for money and tries to come up with a popular application to get money.
Yes.
And it's like, you shouldn't have to sell your research for that. Like, it'd be nice if people saw the merit. I can understand, like, that's not how the world works to an extent. And you sort of have to, like, what's your 60-second elevator pitch? I'm studying brown fat activation from caffeine to improve weight loss. But
yeah, but it's like in a very ideal sense, I like the Richard Feynman basically paraphrasing what he said about it, which is kind of like, it's not really your job as a scientist to convince people why this is cool and important.
You're not in marketing.
Right. Like, I think, again, in a very idealistic sense, as scientists, our job is to uncover truths, like to find things that are kind of already there that exist as far as the universe is concerned. And we hopefully are like tools to help reveal those things.
Absolutely.
Not to like go out there and sell why. Obviously, there's a huge benefit to selling the implications of science.
Yes.
It's made people's lives a lot better. But it would be nice if maybe some people could appreciate just the pure science of it sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess
neat.
is all I'm saying.
It's a neat experiment. And, at the same time, am I going to use this to enjoy my cup of coffee a little more when I can't eat my eggs in the morning, every morning?
No,
Probably.
Now you can eat eggs because all you have to do is drink another cup of coffee and it offsets.
Oh, because they showed in the paper that it reduces cholesterol. They didn't show that, but there might. I mean, that's true. You got to drink more coffee.
Uh-huh. Every egg you eat, another 2 cups of coffee.
That sounds reasonable.
You said there was one news article that you were not happy with?
Yeah, for all these reasons. The New York Post said coffee and brown fat could be the secrets of fighting obesity. And it's like,
come on.
I didn't see anywhere in the paper where they were like, and by drinking this much coffee or caffeine, you would burn this much, these many joules, which corresponds to this much fat, which over this period of time, like there was none of that.
Yeah. And like obesity has kind of a whole implication of not just like that physically you have some more fat on your body. It's also like all the health implications that come with being obese,
Yeah. Like it doesn't matter. Like I'm sure obese people drink caffeine.
Like if that were true, yeah, exactly. If that were true, we would know it. Like,
yeah. Like I think if you look at the population of like the United States, like most adults consume caffeine in one form or another. So it's like caffeine isn't the cure-all for obesity anyways. Otherwise, people wouldn't be obese.
Dude, that's such a good point that the headline says could be the secret to fighting obesity. It's like, really, you're saying that you're communicating to what is likely half of your audience is obese, just based on the demographic makeup. I mean, literally half of our country is obese. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're talking about like the most popular drink. And you're suggesting that somehow it's secretly the cure? Like, no.
Like, people are probably over-caffeinated already.
Yes, everyone drinks coffee and everyone is obese, like, for all intents and purposes. There's no secret here.
Yeah, maybe it's like, maybe we're getting too much caffeine and then decreasing the amount of sleep that we need. Or not, like, sleep that we need. Like, we're not getting enough sleep for what we need.
And then we're getting social jet lag.
Which is also linked to obesity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So social jet lag. Exactly.
Yeah.
Social jet lag is the cure.
The cure? No, that's the real enemy.
It's the social jet lagging.
Anyway, so hopefully that wasn't too rambling about that news article stuff.
New York Post just got me fired up.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes we go into this whole, like, again, as Dan Carlin would say, high-minded, like, oh, well, we are scientists and like people should like science. And
yeah,
but that's kind of silly.
But we like it.
We like it. And it's our show, damn it.
We can say whatever we want.
We can say what we want.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
thank you, James. That was a really fascinating paper. I learned what brown fat is.
Yes.
Which is like, now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of crazy that I didn't know what that was. It's like in me.
Yeah, you have some. It's what bears use to hibernate, man.
Oh, no way.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Maybe caffeine is the secret to longer hibernation.
Boom.
Boom. Curing bear obesity.
Bears use it all the time. Bear tested, mother approved.
Anyway, so cool paper. We will be posting that on our website, paperboyspodcast.com, which just got a total makeover. We're very proud of it. It's our little baby. We've been kind of chipping away at that project for a long time now.
Check it out.
Yeah, check it out. It's just, the content is organized in hopefully a more digestible way and more shareable.
Yes.
I hope. I don't know. Anyway.
Check it out. Engage. Hit us up on social media, Instagram Twitter. We'd love it at paperboyspod, or shoot us an email the old-fashioned way at paperboyspod@gmail.com.
And last little pitch for our Patreon, patreon.com/paperboyspod, for about the price of a cup of coffee, which is a brown fat stimulator. For about the price of one brown fat stimulation, you get a bonus episode every month, and we send you a free Paperboy sticker. They're very high quality.
They're great stickers.
I've got about 50 on the back windshield of my car. I've been pulled over 10 times now. And then there's also some other really cool benefits that you can get there. So go ahead and check that out, patreon.com/paperboyspod.
Thanks so much for listening, and please join us next week for another exciting edition of Paperboys.
Thanks for listening.